Hey, what's going on guys, Ash here, back again with another Rogue Sun review, this time talking about issue 27. So with issue 27, we are still continuing on with the Noxious story arc. We took a bit of a detour last month with Radiant Black showing up, but this time they're back on the mystery trying to figure out who this Noxious guy is and what exactly is his motives. And with this story arc, although Noxious is the main antagonist of this story arc, we still have to keep in mind that Caleb is back and plotting something in the background. And no doubt about it, that plot or that ploy will probably come into play within the next couple of issues as his plan comes out. Because right now, Caleb has only had a few speaking lines, but if you pay attention to his dialogue and how everyone else talks about him, you know this guy is planning something and possibly taking over Aurie's body within the next couple of issues. So this issue opens up with Dylan and Aurie training in the forest, and one thing I do like about with Aurie now being Rogue Sun is that it's a good character moment for Dylan, because Dylan, yes, he's always been this asshole loner, but with his sister now having the powers of Rogue Sun, he's got to make sure that he can keep Aurie safe, keep his sister safe. With her being a hero and getting involved in this line of work, not only that, we've also got the looming threat of Caleb out there, where Caleb is plotting something in the shadows and slowly making their move, which is something that they bring up in this issue, that he's plotting something, but we have no idea what it could be. One could speculate that he's going to take over Aurie's body, but it might be something else and we're not entirely sure yet. So I feel like Caleb is the character we want to keep our eyes on within this story arc. Like I said, Noxious is the big bad, but Caleb is plotting something in the shadows. So he is definitely looming over to be the next antagonist, probably either at the end of a story arc or leading into the next story arc, where Caleb will be another threat once again. But like I said, this issue opens up with Dylan and Aurie training in the forest, and although we get a lot of fun dialogue between the two of them, there is this one scene within the training where Aurie is trying to hold on to sort of like the chain as it wraps around a tree and sort of use the momentum when she lets go of it, is definitely going to play a role within the next issue with how this month's issue ends, that is for sure, because that's kind of alluding and setting up something later down the line. I'd call it Chekhov's gun, but it's more like Chekhov's chain or Chekhov's rope, with what happens at the end of this chapter and probably leading into the next one. So after their little training, Aurie has a suggestion to Dylan by saying after school they should do some digging into Noxious to see if they can find some more clues about them. But Dylan declines because he says that Marcus and Aurie are practically the same person, so it might complicate a few things. But he also says we should just chill out and wait for the call, because when the Rogue Sun starts beeping, that's when we'll know they're making their move. But Aurie says, look, the stone can tell you if something bad has already happened. We want to save people, so we've got to get ahead of it. Which she does have a good point there by saying, look, if we can stop the danger before it happens, we can save a lot of people. But Dylan isn't the biggest fan of that whole flying patrol thing and says he's got to get to school. So during the drive to school, you have Marcus and Dylan discuss the Aurie situation and how much of a threat Caleb could be. But Dylan tries to reassure Marcus by saying, look, Caleb's bad news, but Aurie has the advantage I didn't have. She actually knows what she's dealing with. And this is where Marcus interjects by saying, look, she thinks she does. She takes after her father like that. But Caleb is a tactician. As a Knight of the Sun, he buried monsters, led soldiers into battle, and toppled kingdoms. Aurie will do great things one day, but she spent her entire life seeking approval from teachers and coaches, and this is where Dylan interjects by saying, and parents? So hearing that line, it does give us a little bit more about Aurie. One, that she's going to probably get set up to do great things in Rogue Sun later down the line, but also learning that she's always been seeking approval her entire life. It does kind of understand her weird connection to Caleb and why she's sticking around him for so long, even though the dude is bad news. But Marcus then says to Dylan by saying, look, you're the most defiant, authority-hating child I've ever known, and Caleb convinced you to give him everything. What do you think he can convince Aurie to do? Which is definitely, like I said, foreshadowing something that might happen later down the line with the deal that he wants to make with Aurie. Because, like I said, this can either end a few ways with Aurie and Caleb. either she gets her body taken over, or possibly we could see all those other rogue suns show up again that were inside the Sunstone, because we haven't seen those guys in a hot minute, and if there's a lot of rogue suns within the Sunstone, then maybe more of those rogue suns can make their appearance once again. We're not entirely sure, but we've still got answers to get, like why was there another Sunstone? We haven't gotten the answer to that yet, but hopefully we'll get answers later down the line. But like I've said for like the past couple of issues with Rogue Sun, Caleb is bad news and the dude can't be trusted. So when Dylan gets to high school, you see him get into this argument with Vanessa, and Dylan does have this heart-to-heart talk with her, saying that he wants a different life, something with more or less life and death, and he says that he's tired of being an arsehole. Now, there's probably some truth to that, but there's probably also some lie to that as well. But it's hard to say if Dylan is being genuine here. You can tell that he does care about Vanessa, but hearing that he says he's tired of his life and death stuff, it does probably allude that he's tired of doing this hero stuff, and he might want to settle down later down the line, which was something that was brought up at the start of his story arc, where he might have the opportunity to step down from being Rogue Sun, but we're not entirely sure yet. We'll have to see where that plays out. But yeah, it looks like Dylan is trying to patch things up with his love life at school. So after that, you then cut to Aurie and Caleb going to this car yard, trying to find some clues about Noxious. And Aurie makes this remark by saying Dylan and Caleb should have really stuck together. And this is where Caleb goes on this big spiel by saying Dylan had no commitment, no diligence. He is more to the wayward souls Mourningstar seduces than he is a hero. Both ineffable power to squander and on a personal vendetta. So I'm sure that speech is definitely alluding to something by saying that, you know, Dylan isn't really a hero. He acts more of those people that Mourningstar seduces and makes the villain. So he's sort of outing Dylan to be more of a villain than a hero with his actions and how he acts. So we soon find out what exactly Noxious is after, and he's targeting these three head honchos of this corporation known as Syntech or Synodontech. And one of them, Thomas Sin, is apparently on a yacht somewhere. Brandon Rutledge, he's doing something, but he's doing some shady shit behind the scenes, it looks like. And then we've also got Madison, who becomes the target of Noxious in this issue. But during the conversation between Madison and Brandon, where Madison is held up in this penthouse, pent up in the penthouse, I guess you could say. But we find out there was apparently this Cold Springs incident, and that might be the reason why Noxious is attacking this corporation, or the people who run this corporation. So I'm sure we'll learn more about that backstory later down the line as the issues goes on. But seeing how he first made his appearance where he was like in his car in a parking lot and it looked like he had lost everything, then it might explain a fair few things with everything going on. But Madison becomes the target of Noxious, and once again we get to see Noxious powers at work, and they are freaking gruesome with how he lays waste to the guards, just melting off their skin. It is brutal to see. Freaking brutal. So Dylan and Aurie soon arrive on the scene, and they try and do their best to save Madison, but things aren't looking good for her as she's basically launched down an elevator shaft, plummeting to her death. And while Dylan is trying to fight off Noxious, Aurie decides to go for the save and try pulling up the elevator, but unfortunately she isn't really strong enough and it ends up snapping. And that's pretty much where the issue ends, where the elevator's about to snap, she can't hold her much longer, and Dylan has to come to her rescue. So once again, this issue, although it did feel a little bit slow-paced and it picked up near the end of it, we are definitely building towards the big battle with Noxious in this story arc, and I'm curious to see where it's going to go next, because Noxious is still a villain shrouded in mystery, but like I've said before, he's the threat, but the main threat we should be worried about is Caleb. So I do wonder what's going to happen when the next issue picks up with this falling elevator, and how Dylan and Aurie are going to save the day, because this woman is probably going to have a quick freaking death with this elevator plummeting down. But with that said, I'll bring this review of Rogue Sun issue 27 to a close. What did you guys think of this issue? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Tell me in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And with that said, I will catch you guys later. Peace out. Take care. Bye.